Hurricane Hillary started going right up Mexico and into California, and I don't know, deep state's all like creating all the sphere. It's gonna
Oh
be
no!
10
Oh,
inches and all
it's
that
gonna
stuff.
be everybody's gonna get wet. This horrible thing.
I know all those
I,
poor
we,
people.
Well, it seems to have gotten downgraded from an apocalyptic disaster to a nothing burger.
Well, isn't anything with Hillary's threats always downgraded, except for those that get Arkansas-cited. But
yeah.
she says a lot of stuff and barks a lot, and nothing ever comes of some of those things.
Well,
Yeah,
and Chris, you said
Gavin Newsom, he was looking forward to making a little Southern California photo op, and I think that his opportunity to blame this hurricane on climate change kind of fizzled.
well, and that's kind of the theme that we were seeing right now, and that's kind of the theme for tonight, that the deep state's fear campaign is ramping up, but it is failing. People are not believing it, and they didn't fail to sell it well enough, and people are waking up, and there's enough things that don't make sense. But I'll tell you what, you said this, Chris, before. It's really the prayers of the saints, because if DARPA made that storm, or it doesn't really matter. God is the one that shut it down and heard our prayers, and so it was really a dud. So praise God for that, right?
Yes,
absolutely.
I do have a
take on it. Yeah, go for it.
I do have a funny take on it. We got to show this. This is great. Okay, watch this.
This is a tropical update with your favorite meteorologist. I get the greatest ratings. Look at it. This is Tropical Storm Hillary. Take a look at her. It's the only time you'll ever see Hillary not wearing a pantsuit. Hillary has the potential to be deadly. Just ask Jeffrey Epstein. Hillary has the potential to cause mass destruction, very destructive. Just look at what she did to the blackberries, all those horrible blackberries. Hillary has the potential to wipe out everything in her path, just like she did with the servers and all of those big, beautiful emails. Hillary has the potential to cause very heavy and severe winds, more winds than Eric Swalwell on national television. He let one go, his influence, you know what I'm talking about. And this never would have happened if I was your president. I stopped Hillary once, and I would have been able to stop her again. We would have built a beautiful wall here on the southern border to stop Hillary and anybody else that we wouldn't want entering our country, believe me.
Oh my gosh. That is so hilarious.
That is perfect. Definitely perfect.
Wow.
Big, beautiful wall to stop Hillary and anybody else entering our country.
Good.
There's nobody who does him better.
There is just so much creativity when you're not paying for it all the time. I mean, when the people get involved, you get stuff that just comes out of nowhere, and you're like, this is just amazing. Who would have thought that one? Just the Trump impersonation, and then of course the Hillary. A lot of people are thinking about Hillary Clinton as the Hurricane Hillary. But yeah, to put those two together is just classic. And to tie it together, Swalwell, I just love it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this hurricane. I mean, I had actually had a friend post that people are saying that they're reporting that the rainwater smells like burnt candles or chemicals. And so it makes you wonder, okay, was this planned, organized? The first hurricane we've had in California since 1968 was the big news, and it's all linked to this climate change narrative, but it's failing, it's petering out. But I wonder if the chemical smells are real. Or a friend Shannon I posted on my Facebook page her testimony and testimonies of others saying it smells weird.
Yeah, and then you have the hurricane. Yeah. There was a simultaneous earthquake down there that it freaked a lot of people up. I think it was Ventura County in Ojai, and it was 5.4 is what I saw. So it just felt like it was for the faint of heart. It just freaked them all out.
It just seems like a lot of attention. You know, I don't want to read too much into things, but I do remember way back in 2017, actually, when we had the Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Joseph coming at the same time. So it's Mary and Joseph. And it was right at that time when that whole, it only happens once every 7,000 years, you know, the alignment of the stars where Jupiter was leaving, you know, it was a sign in the heavens. There's a verse about
that was
it.
the Revelation 13 sign, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and there's many ways to interpret it, but there's one literal way, and that only happened once. And that was exactly when Hurricane Mary and Joseph, both of those hurricanes were hitting at the same time. And there's so much going on. I just wonder if there's something, and I don't know, you know, time will tell, but if there was something in the spirit where things are happening, you know, and they manifest themselves. An earthquake on the same day as a ultra rare occurrence of a hurricane or tropical storm from a hurricane just right at our southern border. It just really was interesting.
Well, it'd be interesting to know if it was 10 meters or 10 kilometers down, because that's the distance where they blow up the deep underground military bases. So when you look at where the earthquakes are, check the depth, because that's not a seismic activity normal depth for an earthquake. And I didn't get a chance to check on that, but you know, energy weapons can cause earthquakes too. And we've heard a little rumor about disasters and energy weapons. A lot of people believe that that was the cause of the Turkey earthquake last year, and that there was seemed to be quite a bit of evidence of that. So it'll be interesting to see whether this is just rumor and everybody's on the energy weapon bandwagon right now, or if people are seeing some truth.
Well, and the key here is that it is not disputable that we have energy weapons. I mean, they have energy weapons on one of two places that they actually have a station for the United States Navy energy weapon is on Maui, on one of the mountains in Maui. So the question is that was it used? And my hypothesis is that if it was used, it wasn't necessarily our government, but maybe a rogue player within our government, with a deep state version of so like there's a part of our government that's gone rogue. Or maybe even that technology was stolen by China, because we know that there was a use of energy weapons on some of our ambassadors in Cuba. They were getting very sick, and then they found out that there was some sort of energy weapon being used against them. So I think there's a lot of testing of various technologies going on, and this might have been that, but it might not have been. It just might have been a very bad, hurricane with a bad fire. No matter what, it was a horrible failure, catastrophic failure of public safety. And I think we said that last week, but there's a lot more stuff coming out, right? There's a lot more stuff coming about Maui.
Well, there's some things that should have come out by now, like the confirmed dead. You would think that people would have the count in, and it's very, very odd, because you would think you would put, hey, my child's missing, my family member's missing, they were last seen here. And so that list has been very reluctantly, there really hasn't been a list that's been removed. What we do know as of today, that there are at least 1,300 that are unaccounted for. And here, this is a week ago, and 106 confirmed dead. There were 2,700 structures that were valued at over $5.6 billion. And, what I'm noticing is that government isn't the solution to Maui's problems, but it really does seem to be creating some blockades to things getting through, relief efforts. And as a retired firefighter, we would, the fire agencies would run the incidences throughout the cleanup procedures. And it looks like FEMA and the government has taken the local jurisdiction out of the equation. And so there's just a lot of questions. We talked about a lot of the abnormalities last week, but one of the things was that the water, it took 5 hours to get the water department to change over the water mains so they could get water diverted from another area. And that, that's standard operating procedure in a city management system.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and there's also clarity that the person who was in charge of water was a diversity hire who was focused on ESG. And like you said, it was like 5 hours before they opened the water lines to actually stop the fire. So there's a lot. I mean, people say, oh my gosh, don't become a conspiracy theorist around this stuff. But there are so many unanswered questions and such a horrible, catastrophic failure of public safety that there's nothing else for us to do than fill in the gaps with what we think might have happened. So if they don't want us to do that, then give us the actual numbers and quit hiding them. We're not a bunch of children. They can speak the truth to us. How many kids died? Like family. There's reports of people going in and saying that they're finding the bodies of families all in a huddled together in rooms, and completely burnt, to the crisp. And it's like this how they even had fire warnings days ahead. And the governor was said, well, we didn't, they said they didn't use the alarms. Then later they're saying, well, some alarms were broken. Well, okay, did you not use the alarms or were they broken? Which one was it? Because before you said it wasn't used, and the guy who quit his job because he didn't sound the alarm, he said, I didn't sound the alarm. And so there's a lot of discrepancies here. I mean, one of the big ones right now is that they're not letting in any additional journalists who are not mainstream media in there. And there are the individual journalists are in there. One of the guys I saw a video of him. He was being harassed while he was on Steve Bannon's war room. Some guy shows up behind him and starts harassing him, saying, we know where you're at. And he got really spooked. So this is happening where they're not letting the normal people, the average, citizen journalists report on what's going on. They're cut because they got something they're trying to cover up.
Yeah. Yeah, I also saw a video on basically to exit out of Lahaina while the fire was going, and the exits got blocked, of the road. And, the officers, they would ask them, why aren't you letting people through? And they're saying, hey, I'm just following orders, so they shut down the roads to get out of there. And there were quite a few cars, back to back in line on that road, burnt to a crisp. So I don't, that's another question that needs to be answered and addressed for sure.
Yeah. And some of us have seen the videos of the people getting out of their cars and jumping into the ocean. I actually heard today, my wife, one of our friends who's a pastor, his son lived there and they were part of YWAM, and he and one of his kids were part of one of the families that jumped out of the car into the ocean, and they had a blanket that they just got wet and put over themselves and they huddled there, and they finally had to come back in because they're getting exhausted. And, the mother was holding the babies under her shirt, and the adults were like, the 12-year-old was like, Mom, you take care, I'll cover up. And they were huddling together in the water and then getting exhausted and coming back to the water line. Like, where was the response? Well, I mean, I was an ocean lifeguard. We had 3 boats that covered and boats would come in, and they would call the boats, and they should have been calling emergency boats in and bringing people out of the water, but nothing. They're doing nothing. I mean, there's no response at all. And this is very fishy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well,
then the other part Chris, you mentioned earlier, like all these kids that are gone, the question I have is, they've shut down a lot of human trafficking, and you brought this up. Where do the kids go? I'm wondering, did someone come in and say, hey, come on, we'll take you out? And there was abductions going on in the middle, because we know, talking to Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard, whenever there's tragedy, that's when the harvesters come in, and they call it harvest time. The human traffickers come in, and they're able, because of the chaos, they're able to come on underneath and steal kids. So, maybe some of them aren't burned up. Maybe some of them were abducted. So, I mean, obviously that's horrible to think about, but that is the statistics, and those who study human trafficking to stop it say that's what goes on in stuff like this.
Well, that island is not new to human trafficking. I mean, it started very early on, even when settlers came down, and so, he would take the young Polynesians and stuff like that. So it's definitely not something new.
Yeah, it's been a hub, hasn't it, for ages? And then there's the idea with the energized weaponry. If there was an energized weapon, that there was belief that the nanotechnology in the vaccination actually has a reactivity to the electrical climate from the laser focused from the weaponry. So there are just a lot of things that feel nefarious. And like you said, we don't want to be unduly conspiratorial, but we also want to ask the right questions. We want to keep a conversation going, and definitely something like how many have died because of this event. That is a legitimate question. And the mayor of Lahaina was infuriated with that question that the reporters asked, as though it was causing trouble. And he said, I can shut this thing down right now. And he's referring to the interview, if you're going to be like that. And there was no animosity with the question. It was like the question in everybody's mind was, where are the people and how many did we lose? And so we just want to say to our listeners, stay strong with Maui and the people of Maui. We're not going to just let this thing go. We're not going to let Lahaina become a 15-minute city. We're not going to let things shift where the old-time property owners and the families that have been there for years don't get to go back to rebuild. And so we want to be part of the solution and part of advocating that they need to be able to rebuild.
Yep, I agree. And, this guy, no land grabbing is basically what we're saying for our brothers and sisters that have lived in that land all their lives, and their parents and their parents' parents. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. It's interesting. And I just learned this on Sunday morning. A realtor in that area who owns property in that area, he said, praise God, his house was not destroyed, but he said that it's little known fact that the mayor changed the laws of building 2 weeks before this event. And he ushered in a new law that said, if there is an emergency housing crisis, they can supersede all of the existing laws and about restricting what you can build and what you can't build in the historic Lahaina area. So he's like, and he says, I know this because I try to sell houses there, and they won't let us do certain upgrades to houses because of these laws. And it's been like that for years, and they're still there. But 2 weeks before the fire, the mayor of Lahaina, of Maui, he actually changed the law, instituted a emergency housing crisis law that supersedes all those laws. That just smells fishy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, more investigation. We'll see. Absolutely. What other news items do we have during the week? I know that just as of this afternoon, I saw the Praying Medic posted. Let me add that right there. Just, remember Andy New?
Yeah, Andy New. He got attacked, right?
Yeah, he got attacked. He was in Portland, and he was I want to say he worked for Rolling Stone. I can't remember actually, but he was a reporter. And they just kept beating him up, hitting him. Yeah, he was the one that they put milkshakes on him, and then I think someone threw a brick at him. He got pretty messed up. But anyway, George awarded him $300,000 over against Antifa, and there's 3 specific people with Antifa that were ordered to each give $100,000. So we'll see what happens. I know that 79% of lawsuits don't get collected, but he might be super motivated too, especially since it's it's an organization for one, so it's not a single person. So we'll see what happens, but very interesting. Another thing was truthed out today was Donald Trump. He said, "Can you believe it? He says, I'll be going to Atlanta, Georgia on Thursday to be arrested by a radical left district attorney, Fannie Willis, who's overseeing one of the greatest murder and violent crime disasters in American history. In my case, the trip to Atlanta is not for murder, but for the perfect phone call. she
Making the perfect,
campaigned. Yeah, and the perfect phone call he's referring to is that one that was made to Ukraine. Do you remember Burisma, the energy company, and it was all shady and all that stuff? It was being investigated, and Donald Trump was calling and asking, "Hey, are you going to look into this? This seems a little bit fishy." And he just asked him. He didn't say I'm withholding money or like Joe did. And because he had asked that, they want to have him arrested, put behind bars. Isn't that crazy?
Well, he already was up for that the one impeachment on that perfect phone call, I believe. That wasn't that the basis for the first impeachment indictment that came against him. He had 2 impeachments, and that first one was because of that, and also the intel officers that testified against him. So it just feels like this is a time of shaking in our government. I mean, what does it mean for us? If you get a chance, listen to Levin, Mark Levin. He did a great. It was on his Truth Social. It's actually on President Trump's Truth Social. He did a great bit on what is going on with the indictment and really the travesty. And Fani Willis, she basically is corrupting justice. And what's interesting is Trump is going to have to show up for the trial in the indictment on March 5th. And March 5th is the day before Super Tuesday. So as a candidate, Donald Trump will be on the day before. He won't be able to campaign in any of the Super Tuesday states. And there are about 10 of them. And he will, by Willis's order, he's going to have to go into the courtroom and be in front of this corrupt DA and be really subject to her wildly corrupt trial. And it'll be like a show because, her father was a party member in the Black Panther. He was a high-level Black Panther instigator. And so she has some family background of extreme interfering with justice. Wow. So just know that have President Trump in your prayers. One of the things that bothered me was Newt Gingrich. He was defending Trump, and I'm not a fan of Newt. He was defending Trump and said that the DA, Fani Willis, was reportedly had received a phone call over the last weekend, when the indictment came through. And he said, according to his source, and I don't like to have all these unverified sources, but Gingrich said that an undisclosed Washington, D.C. official in a position of power, and he was inferring either the DOJ or the White House, said you need to rush the indictment of Trump and his 18 that are also part of that are being indicted with him because of it had something to do with the appointment of David Weiss with Merrick Garland as the special counsel investigating the allegations around Hunter Biden. So there's all this look here, don't look there. And it just feels kind of shady.
Well, and I think we might be the phone call that is actually, it's not actually the phone call that he was in, the phone call he's getting indicted for is when they said he called and asked the secretary to find a way to overturn the election, attempts to influence the election. So it's Fulton County District Attorney announced she was looking into possible illegal attempts to influence the results in what has become America's premier political, and it goes on. But it was a 2021 phone call to suggest Georgia's Secretary of State should overturn his election loss. So I think that's the phone call actually that it's referring
Oh,
to.
thank you for that correction. When he said a perfect phone call, I remember him
Yeah.
so many times talking about the perfect phone call. So that is my mistake, and I apologize. I should have looked into the details of
not
it. It's a fresh
well,
one that just
it's easy to get have a mistake because they're constantly indicting him over phone calls, trying to impeach him over phone calls, when we know Vice President Biden was sending emails with an alias to conduct his son's unlawful business practices and unethical business practice. So they're constantly attacking one little thing that they say could potentially be a crime, which is not a crime, for something that is really unethical, immoral that Biden's been doing, right?
Right. Yeah. And he was calling because he said, find me those 12,000 votes, because he knew that there were votes that had not yet been counted in Georgia. And so they hadn't been counted yet. And Biden had already been determined the winner in that state. And so when he called up, it was like, where are those votes that haven't been counted yet? You need to find those so we can count them.
Yes.
So we can reverse this thing.
And so what's wrong with that?
Absolutely in his jurisdiction and his prerogative to say.
Yeah. There's not one thing wrong with that.
Nope. It's all the context that they create. I just wanted to take a step out. I've been thinking about all the things that President Trump has gone through, all the attacks and stuff, and he just keeps coming back. He's a fighter. And I really do believe that God picked him for a reason. And, it reminds me of the story on Samson, where I'm just going to pull that up, that we're talking about it a little earlier today. But it says Samson, you know what? Let me move ourselves over. There we go. I can see the whole thing now. Chapter 13, verse 14. Or 14, I'm sorry, chapter 4. It says, Samson went down to Timrah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives, among all of our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's right for me. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines at the time that they were ruling over Israel. And what's really interesting about that was, there were laws, laws of Moses that you should marry within your group, and not the heathen outside and all that. And yet this particular time God chose because he was looking for an occasion to confront the Philistines. And I believe that God is looking for an occasion to confront the deep state, the wickedness that they have done. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to pick a fight with you, and I'm going to use a fighter, somebody who is strong. And I believe that Samson was a strong man that tore things down. He wasn't a perfect guy. I mean, he did quite a few things, but who else would have done it back then, right? But yet, and the same thing goes for today. The church is so, I don't like the mean tweets. That's not very Christ-like and stuff. You know what? You need a fighter. He grew up building queens and down. I was reading the Art of the Deal. So impressed with all the hoops that he had to jump through just to work with different groups. He worked with good groups, bad groups. He had to work with everybody to build New York to what it was. And so he was a fighter. He was always in the courts, but he always was doing good things and the right thing. From his book, of course, he's going to say that, but that, he's no stranger to that. And he's no stranger even now. He is not shaking in his boots. He knows what he has, and he knows that he is going to come out victorious. And so I think God has picked the right person for the right job. And so if you don't like his tweets, I'm sorry, but you know what? He needs somebody that's not a little wussy, holy, I don't know, just one of those type, ivory hand pastor. He needs.
Well, he's a fighter, like you said. He's a fighter, and one of the things we used to teach in our school, ministry school, was that if you wait to be perfect to be used by God, you'll be perfectly useless to God, because none of us are perfect. All of us have fallen short of the glory of God. Every one of us has sinned and failed. All of us, there's not one of us that's righteous, the Bible says. And so, but God chooses to use the weak things of the world to confront, to show the wise, to confound the wise. God uses those who aren't perfect. I mean, King David, there was great things about him, but he was also, even King David, committed adultery and had somebody killed. So it's not like we're saying that we're okay with anything evil that Trump might have done. It's just we're saying that he's the right fighter for this role right now, and he's not perfect. No, he's like a Cyrus. He's like a Jehu, but we're not picking a pastor. We're not picking a church leader.
Right.
We're picking someone to lead the nation and fight back against the deep state. And if you believe, like I do, that he is like a Jehu, Jehu's number one job was to destroy the house of Ahab and Jezebel. And I believe that's what Trump's job is to destroy the works of the deep state, and the Clintons, the Obamas, those of who have aligned themselves with evil. And hey, can I be wrong? Sure. But my belief about this is that's what's going on here.
Yeah. And the truth is that Trump, he does support biblical values and biblical policies. He may not personally have the highest level of piety, but you said it very well. I think that the conservative Christians who are voting in the blocks, and you could see it in the polls right now, they're smart enough to know the difference between choosing a pastor and choosing a president. And so I think you have to also look at his fight over and over again. He says, I'm doing this for the children. And I believe it's because he knows that children are the commodity. That is how they market. It's what they sell and trade on the black market of the deep state and the Luciferian. And there is a Luciferian cabal system that is part of the George Soros one world order type of movement that we see in Davos, we see in the Bilderbergs. That is a planned alternative government, and they trade with children. And so that is one of the reasons we're probably going to see some more natural disasters and false flags that are unusual, is to resupply the children, because Trump has shut down a lot of the pipeline of children in the deep underground military bases, in the tunnels, in the places where they were being trafficked. So be praying for Trump, because this is a spiritual battle too. So there's a lot of witchcraft coming at him. There's a lot of, he's not just coming against people who are humans. There are demonic forces that are coming against him. And so we want to just support him with our prayers.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. And I think one of the things we also need to talk about, that we're seeing over and over again, and we'll talk a little more about this, but the demonic forces, like I was mentioning, Ahab and Jezebel, were some of the most wicked kings and queens of Israel. And they were so bad that there, in one instance, Ahab, the husband, wanted a garden, and he couldn't get it because he wanted to buy it from someone. The guy wouldn't sell it. So Jezebel went ahead and rounded up unclean people to attack him and to make up lies so that she could get the people who owned Naboth, who owned the garden, stoned. And basically she was successful. She actually rounded up worthless men to lie against innocent Naboth. And people ended up basically using lies and slander, and then paying them, these unclean people, these worthless men, the scripture says, who will lie, who have no ethical standards, and get the guy killed so that she could take the land. Isn't that what's going on in Maui? Isn't that what's going on with J6? Isn't that what's going on with these indictments of Trump? Trump is facing the same forces of darkness that was ran into by this. And so I was just pointing out, this is 1 Kings 21, that story.
Yeah.
So the other one,
it's going on against people of God, people of faith. I mean, here's this one. This is a happy ending finally after a year. Torben Sondergaard. Torben was a person in Denmark who just really started teaching the Bible straight as the Bible. This is the way the church should be, just like the book of Acts, and very simple, probably the most purest gospel I've heard, or one of them, and he would just teach people, but he wouldn't teach to be the leader or the teacher. He was teaching people to do things like praying for people to be healed. And so people that have never prayed for people to be healed, all of a sudden they're praying and they're seeing people get healed. Like in one day, they're learning this, and that's what he would do. And he was starting to travel all over the world. And unfortunately, Denmark did not like him. People got offended. And so they had it out for him. They said it was illegal to do exorcism. So they were going to put him in jail because he was casting out demons. I mean, he would just go up and start praying for someone, and they'd be doing the worm on the floor, and all of a sudden they'd be, delivered. And that they did not like that at all. So they made it illegal. So he had to leave that country. So he came to the U.S. and was seeking asylum. And, it's really bad what we did, because what happened was they canceled his visa on him and didn't notify him. And within a week of doing that, they arrested him. And at first they said, "Oh, you're running guns, gun smuggling." And he's like, "What?" And then those were found out to be completely false. And, and they let that go. But he stayed in solitary for a full year, solitary, small little cell by himself. And they'd let him out for like a couple hours. And this guy, he's not a big build or anything like that. And, they put him in, it was in a Florida prison with a lot of like murders, rapers, just really, at one point he says, "I'm the only white guy. And I don't, I'm not very good at the language. And, didn't know Spanish and some things like that." He was really scared. He said. And then what had happened was we had a representative out of what was Louisiana, Clay Higgins. Yep. Clay Higgins decides to address this in Congress just this week, and he had it put in the record that this guy was falsely accused, and he's being he's a perfect example of persecution. He's saying, this government and this administration is hostile. And they persecuted this guy.
They target him because he's a Christian evangelical pastor, minister. They put that letter in, and the day after they finally released him after a year and a half of being in jail.
Praise God, he's free. Wow.
Yeah. And this is where he sees his wife for the first time. So he was flown back to Denmark, and then they finished the paperwork there. He couldn't stay to Denmark because, he left because they, and so he was free to lead, and then he left and met his family. So he hadn't seen his family. He hadn't even seen his family in over a year, like a year and a half.
He's had grandkids while he was in jail, and he'd never met them, and didn't.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to tell him that he was going to miss out. They kind of held it from him because it was already so hard for him to be there. The good news about his time in the jails is he led almost every person to Christ that he was in the jails with, and he was leading Bible studies in the short amount of times that he had out. And the only thing he had was a Bible. And he said one of the good things is he learned how to preach from the English Bible because his English wasn't very good. And so he read the entire Bible multiple times in English language, and he can preach from it. He's got sermons coming out of it. I mean, imagine what the sermons this guy's going to be preaching when he's done.
Oh yeah.
Modern day Paul.
Ourselves. We'd seen, first time I saw him, I drove down by myself one night to Santa Monica, and there was an address at someone's house, and I just went down there, and I was at this house, and they weren't there yet, and so I just sat in the backyard with this guy, and then all of a sudden this big crowd of people came, and he came and he did what they call a kickstart, and he said, "Okay." He just started talking for an hour. He says, "Okay, we're going to go down now, and we're going to put this to work at Santa Monica, where the wharf is and all the rides and stuff." And so we just all went, and he, I started to talk to him. He's like, "Hey, no offense, but I've got to have every one of us pray for somebody. And so I gotta stay focused here." And so he would grab, and then when it was my turn, he just grabbed me by the arm and says, "Okay, you're going to pray for the next person. Let's go." And we just walked down the walkway, and all these people, and he said, "Hey," and he would start the conversation like, "Hey, I noticed you're limping," or, something like that. And he'd say, "Hey, do you have any pain?" And then, my buddy's going to pray for you. And he would, me, and he would put us all into that. So it wasn't about him doing it. It was about him training. And that's what pastors should be doing, in my opinion, is they should be equipping the saints to do the work of the gospel. And part of the gospel is sharing with power. And so it was really neat to see that. So he had 40 people and we only had about an hour, hour and a half. So he was just like a pinball, boom, boom, boom. You started your praying, and he'd be walking off, and he'd grab the next person in the group, say, okay, you're next. Let's go. Let's find somebody. Oh, look at that person sitting over there. Someone's got crutches or something. And it was just such a neat experience, because it's like, wow, he did that in an hour and a half. He prayed for 45 or 40 people with, us, or about 40 of us or 30 of us. I can't remember the numbers, but it's like, wow, what are we doing with all of our lives? I mean, here this guy's just bing, 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 just going down. And so that was the first time I saw him. And then I saw him with you, Brandon. We went to Sacramento with Ken Cornell, and that was really neat. And just seeing people, even believers that still had some problems in their life and stuff. He just started praying, and they'd manifest things. And it was really pretty powerful. And then I saw him in Hong Kong. I was on a business travel. I knew he was going to be there that weekend. So I'm like, I'm staying an extra day. So I got to walk the streets of Hong Kong, not with him, but with some staff members. He was, with the other groups. We had to break up. So it was a really neat experience. But I felt so bad when that happened to him. It's just like, why would they do that?
Well, and here in Acts, and I say this a lot about Torben. He's like a modern day Apostle Paul. He's all about the Great Reformation, the final Reformation before the coming of the Lord. And in Acts, when Paul was in Thessalonica, it says that there were Jews there that were jealous. So the same force, right? People in Denmark were jealous of him, or they hated him because of what he was doing. They rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace. Well, that actually has happened to Torben. They made up some lies. They rounded up people to make a film about him and to get him kicked out of the city. And in this situation with Paul, they formed a mob. They started a riot, and they rushed into a house and to search for Paul and Silas in order to bring them out into the crowd. So this is the type of forces that Paul ran into all the time. And these are the types of forces think about it. Why would they target him? He's casting out demons. Like he is stopping. He's preaching the gospel. He's empowering the church. Well, Satan cannot have that. And if he's taking over the world, the global powers do not want people free and set free and free of fear and free of control. So they target him.
Yeah. I don't know. You asked the question, Ron, why would they do that to him? And I don't know if you remember when Sidney Powell was on a news show, and she was talking about election fraud. She's the election fraud attorney, and she was talking about it in Georgia, and it was in 2020. And she was saying, she said, and it struck me, because what she said was, what we're dealing with here. And she was talking about election fraud, but there was a car bombing of a son who was of an official who was going to check into the election fraud, and that it wasn't a bombing, it was an accident, but it was obviously not just an accident, because the entire car went up in flames, and the person who was going to look into the election fraud, his son died. And so suddenly, that investigation was over. And what she said is, and this is true, what we're dealing with here is pervasive, and it's very, very dark. It's organized, it's well-funded, and it's pure evil. And they are willing to kill people. And our government right now is, although our nation is one of the most powerful countries on the face of the earth, although we're losing that status very quickly, it is compromised and it is corrupt to the core. And so a lot of the people in elected positions have been installed. They're part of the Luciferian cabal system. And when people go suddenly dead, and then investigations are stopped, and people are intimidated out of testifying, and their rituals and mob killings and fake suicides and car bombs and other activities like jailing innocent people, We're talking about a system that is controlling global leaders and our American government business, our healthcare system. By the way, little COVID news we want to talk about too. But basically, the church, the media, Hollywood, every faction of our nation has been compromised and corrupt to the core. And what is coming for the cleaning house? I hear God saying in the spirit, enough is enough. And so we need to keep praying, keep supporting people like our president and like the Corbyns of this world. We can't let them be forgotten, like the Jake Lanes, who are still J6 in jail in D.C. And haven't had their time in court. We cannot forget these people.
Yes. Boy, you're on a roll there, Chris. Absolutely. I 100% agree.
Well, and we can't forget what they did to us. What they did, they created or coordinated effort through Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the Operation Lockstep, to lock down the entire world for a planned scandemic. And they're going to try it again. And listen, we cannot give into it again. We cannot give in to putting on masks again. What were you saying, Chris, that TSA is going to start having people wear masks again on planes? They're going to start trying to reinstitute based on a new variant, right? Is that right?
Well, Alex Jones said that he had an unverified source that confirmed a new so-called COVID variant that was coming from Canada. And then General Flynn, he retruthed it. And so what Alex Jones said is that people at the Homeland Security were saying, get ready, because in October, there's going to be a new variant and you'll have to wear masks again. And we're going to be doing the mask thing in the airports. So it just is a little suspect. This is the greatest fraud and attack on humanity in the history of the world, COVID schmovid. If we don't get it, we have got to stand up and say, I'm not putting on that thing. I am not putting on a muzzle. I am not stopping talking. These masks, what this new variant is called, Avis. It's
Aris?
Avis. It's
Eris.
Eris, that's right. I'm sorry. It's Eris, Eris. And Eris is a Greek goddess of strife and discord. So I think they're making fun of us. The new variant called Eris, the Greek goddess of strife and discord. It just is infuriating.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that say, "Oh, Alex Jones, you can't," you know what? He has been right.
He's been right. Like 95% of the things Alex Jones has said have been right.
Yeah. So don't, if I put him up against what I have with CNN, MSNBC, especially these last several years, I would have to say he's right way more than they are,
Yep.
So
that's true.
So just because, and what he posted has gone viral in the last 2 days. So it's pretty fresh. But, and people are following up with it. It's sounding like this is the case, that they're going to do another push.
Yeah, another push for another masking. And Rob Schneider, I love Rob Schneider, comedian. He jumped on and posted this. These are the things that are that can go through a mask. So starting with human hair, that's 17 by up to 181 can still fit through a mask. And these are the other things that are smaller than that also fit through the mask. And the is micrometers, or also called microns. So let's watch this. These are the things that are small. Tardigrada, amoeba protus, paramecium, diatoms. These are at 200 microns. Human ovum, 120 microns. Neuron soma. Skin cell, human sperm, 50, 30, 25, pollen, 25, yeast, 10. These all can go through a mask. Red blood cell, 8, can go through a mask. E. coli or Escherichia coli, Lactobacillus, Staphylococcus, and then smallpox, rabies, even smaller, 0.12, and 0.1 is the COVID virus. So you're wearing a mask All those other things fit through the mask, including this one, because it's even smaller. And then, of course, you have the polo virus and the rhinovirus. That is ridiculous. And they're going to make us wear masks for another variation of this SARS-CoV, which is 0.1 microns.
They're going to try. I think people are going to stand up. I am not going to comply.
I'm
the
not
grocery
either.
store, wherever. I'm prepared. And you know what? You need to actually play it in your mind in advance. This is what's going to happen. Someone's going to come up and say, would you please put that mask on? You need to have your response ready. You don't have to be, they're just following their orders. They're working, whatever, a clerk at the store. You can be polite and just say, no, I am not going to go with that game. This is ridiculous, but still be polite, but, make your stand. So you need it however you want to do it. You may want to explode, or you may want to be very polite, however you do it, but have it rehearsed in your mind. So you do exactly what you wanted to do, and not, I can't believe I did that, because you don't want to discredit or underscore that movement. I would prefer things personally to be more civil and kind, especially being a representative of Christ. I would treat everybody, with respect. And so they're just following. They just don't want to lose their jobs. Some people are fearful, and some people would like to make that stand, but just don't have it in them right now. They don't have the moxie for it. Well, maybe you can be that inspiration, just saying, hey, I'm not going to do it. So definitely work it out in your head before this comes and be prepared.
Yeah, there's a quote that I like. This became very important during the first lockdown that they tried. It says, of all tyrannies, a tyranny that is sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under an omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience.
Yeah, that is powerful. Yeah. And I just want to say, if you are a believer and you go to a church and they tell you that it's time to mask up or we're shutting down, I would suggest you go find another church, because what they are doing is they're perpetuating the lie, and they are moving you into a place of fear and control, and they are part of the narrative, whether they mean to or not. I really think this next one, they're going to be testing us. They want to know if we're going to say no or not. And if we just say, no, we're not doing that, you got to be kidding. We can shut down businesses that require that. And there are enough small businesses now, and we should have made enough relationships where we can stand together and we can do what needs to be done to support our locals in the community where they are selling things, whether it's food or whatever it is, the farmers market. But don't go backwards. Do not go backwards.
Yeah, I agree. Couple really, we're getting close to the end of the hour, but I want a couple things I want to share, and then I want to have a video of a song I want to share at the end here. But I want to remind people that we are going to be showing Into the Light. Wake the Bear is doing a video series, and we're actually going to be showing Into the Light at Convergence this coming Friday, August 25th from 6 to 9 p.m. So this is from the creators of Out of Shadows. This is Mike Smith. He did the film Out of Shadows. He is 30 years in Hollywood, and he was a stunt actor, and then became a stunt controller, and then a fight coordinator. He moved all the way up to one of the top of his class in that field. And he got injured on doing this minor stunt, and he basically was paralyzed from his waist down. Somebody prayed for him. He had the massage therapist who was a Christian, and he got healed. And he started to believe. And he also, while he was not working, started to research some things that didn't make sense to him about Hollywood that he was seeing. And he brought things out of shadows. And so this next one is going to be about Into the Light. He's going to talk about the corruption in Hollywood, the corruption in our government, and how there's a coordination of that corruption, wickedness going on. So I want to encourage you guys to, if you're local here in Santa Cruz, come out to that at the Convergence at 377 Capitola Road. that's coming next. And then I had a painting that I wanted to share that I did for Maui. It was a prayer actually that I did for the people of Maui, and I'll show you this one. And it's a picture of, I call this painting reinforcements. So there's a prayer asking God to send in reinforcements to Maui and to support them and to help them. So this is a prayer that I have, and God would help fight for people who are being wronged, and for lost children, lost families, lost lives, struggling marriages, lost jobs, lost homes, that God would send in reinforcements. And I just painted that just the other night. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the I wanted to play it. As soon as we're done, we'll play it. But
yeah, we'll close with that one. I still had a couple things I wanted to chat with too.
Yeah, keep covering right now.
Yeah, you know what? There was a great interview that I listened to, and I think it was last week. It was with Tucker with RFK Jr.
Oh, yes.
It's just really eye opener. And I'll just kind of quickly go through what I saw at it, but I would encourage you to do a search on that, the Tucker RFK Jr. Interview. But he starts off with, the conversation starts off with, RFK Jr. does not have any Secret Service. He's running for president on the Democrat side, and again, it kind of goes with what we were talking about earlier with Trump. God has used somebody to reach certain types of people, and I think RFK Jr. is one of those to reach people that would never listen to Trump. And so it's interesting that he has no Secret Service. He got denied that support. All the other candidates seem to have it. Even Zelensky has it. Of Ukraine has Secret Service for him. But, he starts to talk about his experience and his connections. And he actually knows a lot more than vaccinations. Just politically, he was going over the history of Ukraine, how we are marching towards a war and we're doing the most foolish things possible. And so he goes back to like 1992. He talks about Gorbachev and the wall going down. And Gorbachev had agreed to allow Germany to be reunified. And so his own people hated him for it. They despised him. They called him a traitor to Russia for doing that. But in exchange for that, there would be a promise that NATO would not move 1 inch east. And Secretary James Baker promised Russia, yes, we will not move NATO even an inch. And so, that was the compromise for that. Well, then, Russia releases the border states and lets them become independent states. And then all of a sudden, we start pushing NATO. Oh, we want to go east. We want to go east. And so I had this one little section I just wanted to, because it's talking about the history of what we are seeing now and why Russia is saying, hey, we cannot go forward with that. So let me just go with that.
The worst mistake America can make, to move NATO to the east. So we went ahead and did it. We moved it not 1 inch, but 1,000 miles, 14 countries. And then we put nuclear-ready missile launchers, Aegis missile systems, which are made by Lockheed and can take Tomahawk missiles 12 minutes from Moscow. We could, in 12 minutes, decapitate the entire leadership of Russia. And we put those in Poland and Romania. And we then tried to move it into NATO into Ukraine. So you remember when my uncle, when Russia put missile systems, nuclear missile systems in Cuba, and my uncle would have had to invade, he was able, the reason Russia put them there then is because we had put nukes, Jupiter missiles, in Turkey and Italy. My uncle and father made a secret deal with Ambassador Dobrynin, where they said to him, look, we understand you're angry. You cannot live with Jupiter missiles in Turkey. That's why you put your missiles in Cuba. If you remove your missiles from Cuba within 6 months, we will remove ours from Turkey. But nobody says what the deal was. And that's what happened. So now we're back, and we've again put nuclear-ready missile systems along right next to Russia. And now we want to go do the one thing that Russia has said, and Putin said again and again and again, this is a red line before Putin. the Russian leadership was saying it is a red line. You cannot go into Ukraine. The Russians have been invaded 3 times from you. Our country's never been invaded. The Russians were invaded 3 times through Ukraine. The last time they were invaded, Hitler killed between 20 and 40 million Russians. Hitler killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. In my uncle's speech to his most famous speech in American University in 1963, in July of 1963, he said to the American people, he said, you know, we're all taught we won World War II, but we didn't win World War II. The Russians won it. And the sacrifice they made to destroy Hitler was beyond anything Americans can imagine. He was trying to tell the American people, you have to put ourselves in their position and understand what they're doing. And he said, a third of the country was leveled. Every city, the forests burned, the cities were leveled, the forests and fields burned. Imagine if that happened from the coast, the east coast of the United States, to every city, forest, and field from here to Chicago. That's what the Russians put up with. So we have to understand this, that Ukraine is a red line. The invasion.
So Ukraine is a red line. But I mean, think about the loss. I mean, it's just, 1 out of 7 people in that country lost. I mean, every town leveled, or every high rise leveled from the East Coast to Chicago. That's what it would equate. I mean, they made
half the country,
and it went through Ukraine. And so that was the one thing. We weren't supposed to move even an inch. We move 1,000 miles, and we have all these satellite states that have become NATO. And all of a sudden, they said, this is the one thing we will not agree. We will not let you do. This is the line in the sand. And we want to cross that. And we started that coup in 2014. We paid for it. We funded a coup and overthrew their first democratically elected president. And we replaced and Victoria Nuland. She was part of choosing the cabinet that would be replacing. And so we put in, after that coup d'etat, we put in who we wanted in power, and then instantly going towards NATO. The one thing the Russians are asking us not to do. And it seems like we are marching down to a war. So
it really came down to like a phone call between Biden and Putin. And he just said, just give me the assurance you won't make Ukraine NATO, and I'll back off. And he said, I can't give you that assurance. And then within that week, Russia invaded Ukraine. And a lot of people don't know that there was actually an agreement already made, a peace agreement that was already made, that Boris Yeltsin came in and screwed up because the globalists wanted a war. And if you remember back, the 16-year plan was to incite a war with Russia. That 16-year plan that Hillary Clinton was supposed to win, and she was supposed to bring about a war with Russia. And so they're still moving forward with the elements of their plan, even though some drawbacks happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I was going to say one thing about Tucker too. Tucker is a truth teller who is toppling the deep state narrative. He is interviewing all kinds of people that are full on truth tellers that don't even care about whether it helps them in their polls. This guy Vivek Ramaswamy, he's like, listen, I'm going to tell the truth, even if it's not convenient. And if I don't win a presidency because of it, then fine. But at least I'm going to tell the truth, because American people need to hear the truth, and they need to be. So he's amazing. Because you've got, I want to encourage people to go on Tucker on Twitter, watch him interview Vivek, watch him interview RFK, watch him interview. There's another one down here where he interviews the police chief from J6.
Yeah.
He Sund, the Stephen Sund. How come? And one of the things that came out is how come he was the police chief in charge of the police that day, and he was not interviewed by the J6 committee.
Crazy.
And he was only given one interview on the news for 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. That's all they cared. The journalists and these journalists of the mainstream media care to hear his story. But he tells an amazing story about how there was intelligence that was withheld from him, and then his number 2 person, who was fired after that, and then the person who withheld the information from him was made his commander, but then everybody in the police all of the other policemen and policewomen said, we give no confidence to this person. And then that person, Nancy Pelosi, moved that person to Berkeley as the head of chief of police in Berkeley. It's just one thing after another. So I just want to encourage people, don't just listen to us. I know you're not, but get out there and listen to these interviews right here with Tucker Carlson and RFK and with Vivek. They'll blow your minds.
Yeah, he's on fire right now. I tell you, people are watching him. He's drawn in, and that's part of waking up. And people are. You could tell that this country is waking up. I mean, we had a phenomenon happen with the music industry, right? Or actually, it's not even the music industry. It's just a backwoods guy that was a nobody just a couple weeks ago. Oliver Anthony, and I think
a guy from the.
If you've got that loaded up.
Yeah, it's a guy from the country actually singing country music, right?
Yeah. So we'll just, it was good. I'm glad you guys came on tonight and listened, and we had a good time. We're going to close with this song, and so we'll just go with that.
Yeah. Chris, have you any final words before we close the song?
No, I love it when a small town guy makes it big.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the number one song in America. And what's happened is this one came right after Jason Aldean's number one song in the small town. Try that in a small town. That was number one song in America. This is number one song in America. And watch how Americans all over the world resonate with this song.
I've been on my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away. Drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to. People like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. I can rock it. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end.
Okay.
Those are rich men, those are rich men.
Oh, this is true. Tell 'em, buddy.
Some of us can't say what we absolutely know is true, and he's articulating.
I wish politicians look out for minors, and not just minors on an island somewhere. Lord, we got folks in the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds. Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground, 'cause all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. Lord, it's a damn shame what the world's gotten to. For people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, it ain't. It's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men north of rich men. I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay.
Damn.
Oh my God! Oliver, Oliver Anthony.
Richmond, north of Richmond.
Wow. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Anyway, good night. And thanks for coming and listening. And tell your friends, support this channel. We could definitely, we'd appreciate it. You could use it. Thanks.
Yep. See you soon.